the last episode, part 2 of Beauty here, you got to see us bring this engine back to life after a very long storage. And if you recall, as soon as we got it running, we pulled it right into the shop and got it up on the lift for a quick inspection. And we found another problem immediately. We had fuel leaking out of a hose underneath the car. This was part of the short section of rubber hose for the fuel return line. And it's hard to see under there, but we saw some drips and we immediately fixed that. And then I gave this thing an inspection looking for any kind of obvious problems. We're particularly focusing on the air suspension at this point. You know, we got this thing running, but we have a long way to go. You know, it's not running perfectly. There's some tuning we're gonna have to do and some inspection work on the engine as well as fluid changes, but we've got a brake system that's kind of frozen up. You know, in part 1, you saw one of the calipers was just totally frozen. So we've got brake work to do, and then we've got the air suspension system to fix. You know, we don't know what's wrong with it yet. I don't know, we might have leaking bags, poor valves, the compressor might not be working. But what I want to do today is we're going to start this engine up and let it run a while, let it warm up, and then we're going to bring it up to speed, and I'm going to cycle through the leveling valve. And we're going to see if we can get this to pump the car up. You can see I got the air cleaner back on there. I wasn't just going to throw it on. I decided to take a closer look at the air filter housing and the air filter on Beauty. You know, we're going to run this for a while, so I want to make sure this is clean and get all the junk out of there. Looking at the air filter itself, it's not too bad. Eventually I'll replace it, but it's fine for the test now. And then I'm going to make sure we get all the extra dirt out of there. And particularly this bottom seal. This is very important. You want to make sure that sealing on the intake, because you can get a lot of dirt stuff coming. I did notice that the breather hose is cracked, so I'm going to have to order one of those in and replace that. But this looks pretty good. So we'll get this back on the engine right now, and then we're going to run this thing and see if that air suspension will pump itself up. So with the air cleaner back on, and we have double checked, we have absolutely no fuel leaks. Now this is really important. You probably didn't get to see it, but I had a fire extinguisher standing by when we were even working on this thing outside. That's one of the disadvantages of gasoline cars. You have to be really careful when you're working around the fuel system, particularly when changing the electric fuel pumps. You want to make sure you disconnect the battery. You don't want any sparking or any power that might activate back at those wires at the pump while you're draining fuel and while replacing hoses. So word to the wise, safety first. Once again, respirators, face shields, the whole thing, and particularly gloves. Remember, gasoline absorbs right through the skin. And every time I see on TV people working around oil and gasoline without gloves, I just cringe. Because remember, your skin is porous and that stuff is going right into your blood. So I'm getting on my little high horse here about safety, but this is really, really important. All right, let's fire this baby up. And I'm going to let it warm up for a little bit, then we'll come back and I'll show you what I'm going to do to check over the air suspension system. I think you can hear it. I'll probably hear it a little better as I get in closer. But we do have an issue with a little bit of a miss. And I can almost guarantee you, if I get into that distributor and clean those trigger points, this engine's going to smooth out. We probably have old and gummed up spark plugs as well. Now once it comes off idle, it doesn't run too badly. Okay, we'll let it warm up. I'll be back in a few minutes. I've let it warmed up now for about 10 minutes. We've got good oil pressure. The temperature's coming up on the engine, no indication to overheat. And I want you to take a close look at this main leveling valve. This is the control unit for your air suspension system. Currently, it's in the neutral position. If I pull back on this, it'll go into the high position. If I push forward on it, it'll go into the standard position. I'm going to go ahead and pull it into the high position. And then we're going to stand back and see if old Beauty here will rise up at all. Look closely at this distance right here. Are we off the emergency blocks? No, we're not. I want to take another look at the front. It looks like it maybe's come up. I'm not sure, but let's check and see if it's off the emergency blocks. No, it's not. It's still on the blocks. If I get down here and look, yeah, that's not moving either. Now, under normal situations, this should already be up. Come on, baby. Now, as is almost always the case, we've spotted another problem in here. Look at the smoke. Now that is oil leaking out of the valve cover gasket and going onto that exhaust manifold. Another problem when you're dealing with these old cars, your gasket's going to be hard too. So there's another job we got to work on. The next thing I want to check is to see if I've got any air in my reservoir tank. The reservoir tank on these W109s is located on the driver front fender up forward. And if you notice, there's a drain right here, and there should be compressed air in here. When I hit this drain, it should blow out possibly even some moisture. So let's see what happens. Look at that. I'm releasing the valve in there, and there is no air in this tank. So this is an obvious problem, and anytime you're doing troubleshooting, when you find an obvious problem, you got to fix it and move on to the next one. That's the way it goes with these old cars. Well, I guess we didn't luck out on the air suspension system, did we? You know, that's part of the fun of working on these old cars and troubleshooting them. Particularly a car like Beauty here, which is in such nice condition, you don't have to do a major frame-off restoration. But it does require some work and some troubleshooting, and that's what I enjoy. You know, I'm out here on a Saturday afternoon, and I'm working on this car because I enjoy this. You know, it's a beautiful day. I'm going to wrap it up. You can see it's starting to get late in the afternoon, so we're going to probably wrap it up. This will be the end of episode 3, and what I'm going to do is in episode 4, we're going to get this up on the lift, and I'm going to use a compressor that can put out at least 175 psi, and I'm going to use a compressor to test a few things. We're also going to test to see whether or not the compressor is actually putting out, and that will require running the engine a little bit once we disconnect the lines just to see if the compressor pump is working. That'll be in the next episode. And we've got to go through the whole system. We've got to check those airbags for leaks. We've got to check all the leveling valves and make sure all the lines and fittings, there's no leaks there. And so you can see the fun will continue.